Welcome to another episode of the Sports Business Leaders Podcast. My name is Justin Tichenell, and Sports Business Leaders is a community event series for innovators, athletes, and executives in sports to connect, share ideas, and explore potential collaborations. And the podcast is designed to help you learn from experienced sports business professionals to grow your sports business. So today I have a very special guest, Sullivan. Thanks for coming on, Sully.
Happy to be here, Justin. It's great to watch and observe the things that you and the sports business leaders are doing. So again, my pleasure to be on the show.
Yes, sir. Likewise. So Sully is a former executive from Under Armour, where he spent 15 years as the director of team sales and director of sports marketing. And during the early days, especially, he worked closely with the Under Armour founder, Kevin Plank, to grow the business a lot. Now, during those early days, Sully, you guys obviously experienced some rapid expansion. And just from researching online, it looked like at one point from 2002 to 2005, Under Armour's compounded annual growth rate was over 120%. So, what were the biggest lessons you learned from being on the ground floor of a company that skyrocketed in the sports apparel industry? And how can today's sports business innovators apply those lessons to scaling their own companies?
I was lucky, Justin. I started there in 2002. Kevin had been in business for 6 years. Kevin had started Under Armour, founded Under Armour his senior year at Maryland as a football player. And spring break of his senior year, he had prototypes and he hit the road. He went to Atlanta to visit with Georgia Tech. He had appointments with almost every equipment manager in the ACC. And his first sale was Georgia Tech. He also landed a sale in Tallahassee, Florida with Florida State. And he did all this while he was a college senior, wheeling and dealing from his dorm room. And he never took no for an answer. If someone said, "Hey, Kevin, I like this Heat Gear t-shirt. Do you have 200 units?" And he'd say, "Absolutely," when he may have only had 25 on hand. He found a way to get it done. Or an equipment manager or football coach would call him and say, "Do you have cold weather goods? We anticipate we're going to play in some cold weather this year." He hadn't invented cold gear, but again, he said, "I'm going to shift on the fly and make this happen." Just a guy that never took no for an answer. But getting back to my start time, I started in 2002, 6 years into the company's existence. And being a University of Maryland graduate and former football player, guys that I knew that were either working in college football or in the NFL, they all talked about this brand, this up and coming brand called Under Armour. And the common denominator was players liked it. It was authentic with the athlete. And at the time, Justin, I was coaching high school football at Cardinal O'Hara. And I'd go into the locker room to talk to the kids and go through our script of practice. And they all had it on under their jerseys, under their shoulder pads. And I said, I've got to speak with these guys, this company. And again, I was fortunate enough to start in 2002, employee 73, and we grew exponentially. Company went public in 2004. We posted 30% growth quarter after quarter for, I believe it was 10 years. We carried that streak for 10 years, 30% growth over quarter. So it was significant. But the most valuable lesson I think I learned, we were a small company when I came on board. Company was solvent. We could make payroll, but many of the people that my predecessors had missed payroll. But the most valuable lesson was I would be in meetings with all facets of the company, whether it was supply chain, sourcing, the credit department, the marketing department. They would talk about ads. Back then, vertical print was a big deal. ESPN Magazine or Sports Illustrated. I know that I'm dating myself. But to get in on the ground floor and learn different phases of the business, it was invaluable to me. And probably the most important thing, creating demand is hard, but we fulfilled demand. We had orders. Our growth was, again, considerable, but it means nothing if you can't ship, the local sporting goods stores that I was responsible for, eFootwear in Brookhaven, or BSN's a national chain on the institutional side of the business, or C&M Sporting Goods in Havertown, Six Smith Sporting Good up in the Northeast. You can create demand for those orders, but it means nothing if you can't fill those orders. And we did. But I felt bad for the supply chain people because it was a scramble. And initially, when I started, all of our cut and sew was done in and around Allentown. And over time, we produced product all over the world, all over the world. So the most valuable lesson was, hey, it's great to fulfill demand, but you will kill your brand. It's great to create demand. You'll kill your brand if you don't fulfill it. That's probably the most important thing I learned. And again, I felt Under Armour was very much a small business in those early days. And I learned a lot about running a small business where prior to that time, I was just a sales and marketing guy.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting, Sully. And I think my biggest takeaway from what you just said was not saying no to saying yes to a lot of things if the customer's asking for it. And it's so interesting just hearing what the shifts in the industries are and how the companies that really make it change with the times. So in that same light, now obviously one of the big things now is NIL, with it being almost a $2 billion industry. Now, the growth of direct to athlete branding and the drastic changes in digital marketing with social media. So, what advice would you give to sports executives looking to navigate these changes and sustain their own companies?
You know, that's a difficult one. I don't envy Charlie Baker, who's in charge of the NCAA. There's a reason they hired a politician. Baker was governor of Massachusetts, but he's drinking from a fire hose. And because you look at all these issues that have to be dealt with, the portal, there's got to be some changes to the portal. I think there should still be a hardship waiver. I think a student athlete should be able to leave if there's a coaching change. But it's now you have students playing at 4 and 5 different universities. It's commonplace now. Um, I don't envy Charlie Baker one bit. And then there's nothing in the way of guardrails for name, image, and likeness. And I think the ideal way to do it is, I think based on an athlete's time at an institution, you potentially tier it. But again, there's ceilings and there's basements. There's a minimum payment and there's a ceiling payment. Right now, there's nothing. And these college coaches don't know what to believe when a student athlete says, this institution has offered me X, or this university has offered me Y. Um, if you are looking to embark on a career as an athletic director, good luck, because the landscape has changed so much. And I'll be fully transparent with you. I left Under Armour 7 years ago, and I thought, would I'd like to be an associate AD at one of the local schools? And those ambitions have been pushed to the side. I wouldn't want any part of it. And I probably left out the most important thing, just the need for money. Every day, what you read in the trade, schools are opting in, some schools are opting out. The realignment piece, you look at a University of Delaware, they're going to move to Conference USA simultaneous to a move up with into FBS football from the FCS level. There's so much. I don't know how these ADs can sleep at night, how they have time, and the constant worry, where is the revenue going to come from, and dealing with donor fatigue. And I don't know if I answered your question. You can rein me in at any point in time or say, hey, Sully, um, but it is an undertaking. And again, I will get you an athletic director from one of those before mentioned institutions, but it might be a 3 hour seminar because there's so many hot button issues for them to deal with and navigate.
Yeah. No, it's so important just to I mean, yeah, I really don't know. Like you're saying, I think donor fatigue is a real issue. And getting I feel like there has to be some regulation. It's just the Wild West. It's crazy how it's changed over the years. And then if you just had to think about your career over the years, and now obviously you're not in the sports business world anymore. You're in screenwriting and you're doing some other like independent things, also some consulting work. Um, what lessons have you learned throughout your career as a sports business executive with Under Armour, that you've applied to your other endeavors up until this point?
Yeah, I'm in the backseat of the sports industry now because I've been with Dan at Leona for my non-compete expired in January of 2018, and Dan's business is also growing exponentially, consulting, specifically apparel contracts or outfitting contracts, as I call them, multimedia rights and some other things. And I also work in a business development role for Field Turf, trying to help them with certain schools that they may have not infiltrated. So I do, I'm in the backseat of the business. Um, so again, I have a distant view, but why don't you rein me in a little bit? What was the question again?
Yeah, so given your experience over the years, like what lessons have you learned over your career that you've been able to apply to other endeavors that you've done?
I think the networking element is far and away the most important. Um, I save contacts, I make contacts. Like any value that I bring to a company is right here, my Rolodex. And I try and stay current. I read the D1 ticker every day, which is free. It's not behind a paywall. Comes out every morning, 7 days a week, and it enables me to track movement and things that are going on within the industry. But I have so many friends that are coaches or staffers at institutions. It enables me to keep track of their movement. And it can be an opportunity. I'll send someone an email and say, hey, good luck on your move from X institution to Y institution. I want to make you aware of what I'm doing now. And it can create a business opportunity for Leona and or Field Turf. But what I have done really well and the value that I bring is my network, because Dan will call me frequently and say, do you know anyone at this university? Their apparel contract will come to term in 18 months. Will you see if they're interested in going to market, if they're going to stay with their existing provider, if they're happy where they are? And I do the same thing with Field Turf, but I put the highest premium. I'm not really good. My analytical skills are not very good. You'd be amazed at how I stayed in the trade as long as I did, as limited as I am. But I can really network. And I think if there's something that I did well at Under Armour, um, the school, the truth is somewhere in the middle, especially when you have schools that you'd ask a private institution for information like what do they receive from a provider. And it was, I built up a lot of experience in negotiating with the schools and the universities, and I think I was good at anticipating their next move. And again, that's based on experience. But I think just the ability to network, which your people do as part of your seminars, is invaluable. And I'm a believer in handwritten notes. You follow up with a handwritten note. I know it sounds like it may have gone the way of the dinosaur, but it's unique and not everybody does it, and it'll make you stand out. So whenever I went on a trip, I would get business cards from the people I met and follow up, and most importantly, save them here.
Yeah. No, that's an invaluable thing. And obviously, given our business with the sports business leaders, that's something that we believe in as well is the value of the network. And the reason I think our community it has been so special is that we're adding value to everybody that's there. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's all about how can you help whoever's in your network, and all that does is just elevate everybody around you. And that helps you in turn. So I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason Dan and Leona is doing so well is there's constant movement by athletic staffers, constant movement. And many of them, when the ADs land in a new job, they hit the ground running and they want to meet donors. They want to get to know their coaches. They want to get to know the student athletes. Student athlete mental health is a major thing that didn't exist when I was a student athlete. I don't know what it was like when you were, but many times they might be a little too busy to deal with their ticketing contract, which is going to end in a year. And that's where a consultant comes in. So networking is invaluable. And again, I think In my skill set, it's far and away the thing I do well. I've got to control the controllables, and that's something that you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. Can definitely tell about your football background. Control the controllables, yeah.
Yeah, there was no mental health assistance. It just you were just told to suck it up and go out in the field when I was a student athlete. And I'm glad there's enormous pressure on student athletes now, because social media, when a kid fails, they fail publicly, and they've got to walk around campus. And there's difficulties that they face that I didn't and people of my generation didn't. So, if I was a AD right now, I'd put mental health above all else because it's so important. Kids put enormous pressure on themselves to perform on the field of competition and in the classroom. Enormous pressure. And depression and anxiety are very real things.
Yeah, absolutely. So great. Well, thanks again, Sean. Any last words that you want to share with the audience today?
No, I'm just happy for you guys, Justin. You're doing great things. I remember, I believe I came in November, and I had said,
Right at
think
the
about
beginning.
dedicated space, think about speakers that come from an interesting background, and you're doing that. And I want to help you going forward with some speakers that I think will bring a lot of value to you and your audience. But thanks so much for reaching out. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Yes, sir. Thank you again, Sully.
My pleasure. Have a good one.